The autumn sun cast long shadows across the dusty marketplace of Xi'an, as 12-year-old Xiu Lan stood trembling on the wooden platform where human lives were bought and sold like livestock. Her small frame was draped in a tattered cotton robe that had once been white, but now bore the stains of weeks spent sleeping in alleyways and scavenging for scraps of food. Around her, the crowd of potential buyers examined the merchandise with calculating eyes. Farmers seeking cheap labor, brothel owners looking for future investments, and wealthy merchants needing household servants moved through the rows of desperate souls with the casual indifference of those accustomed to human suffering. Xiu Lan had arrived at this moment through a series of tragedies that had stripped away every protection life had offered her. Her parents, modest silk weavers in a village outside Xi'an, had died during the harsh winter when a fever swept through their community. With no relatives willing to take in another mouth to feed, she had been sold to pay her parents' debts to a local moneylender who cared nothing for her welfare beyond the silver she might bring. The auctioneer, a greasy man whose breath reeked of cheap wine, grabbed Xiu Lan's chin and turned her face toward the crowd. "Look at this one," he called out in a voice practiced at selling human misery. "Young and healthy, good for household work or factory labor. She's small but strong, and young enough to be trained to your specific needs." Xiu Lan closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's voice, singing lullabies during peaceful evenings, when their small home had been filled with the gentle sounds of silk threads being woven into beautiful fabric. Those memories felt like dreams from another lifetime, almost too precious to believe they had ever been real. When she opened her eyes, she found herself looking directly at a man who stood apart from the crowd of buyers, tall, dignified, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see her as a person rather than a commodity. Chapter 2. The General's Unexpected Presence. General Liu Ming had not come to the slave market with any intention of making a purchase. As commander of the Imperial Guard, responsible for protecting the emperor and his palace, he rarely ventured into the common areas of Xi'an except on official business. Today's visit was part of his monthly inspection of the city's security conditions, ensuring that civil unrest or criminal activity posed no threat to imperial stability. But the sight of children being sold like animals had stopped him in his tracks. At 45, Liu Ming had spent decades in military service, witnessing the brutalities of war and the harsh realities of imperial power. Yet something about the casual cruelty of the slave auction disturbed him more deeply than battlefield violence ever had. He watched as families were separated, as elderly people were rejected for being too weak to work, as young women were examined with the predatory interest of those who saw them only as objects for exploitation. The entire scene represented everything Liu Ming had come to despise about the empire he served, the way power and wealth allowed some people to treat others as disposable resources. When the auctioneer began presenting Xiu Lan, Liu Ming found himself studying the girl's face more carefully. Despite her obvious fear and exhaustion, there was something in her eyes that refused to be broken. She maintained a dignity that her circumstances should have destroyed, standing straight despite her obvious hunger and fatigue. The bidding began with a farmer offering a handful of copper coins, followed by a brothel madam who saw potential profit in the girl's delicate features. As the price climbed slowly, Liu Ming found himself growing increasingly angry at the casual way these people discussed a child's future, as if she were a piece of furniture. 50 silver pieces, he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the crowd's chatter like a sword through silk. The marketplace fell silent. 50 silver pieces was more than most families earned in a year, an impossible sum for a single slave girl. The auctioneer's eyes widened with greed and surprise. 50 silver pieces from the gentleman in the military uniform, the auctioneer called out. Do I hear 60? No one spoke. Who could compete with such an offer? Chapter 3. An Unconventional Rescue. As the auctioneer called "sold" and began the paperwork to transfer ownership, Xiu Lan stared at the man who had just purchased her future. General Liu Ming approached the platform with steady steps, his expression unreadable behind the composed mask that years of military command had taught him to wear. Up close, Xiu Lan could see details that the crowd had missed. The careful way he moved, suggesting someone accustomed to combat. The quality of his silk uniform, indicating high rank. And most importantly, the kindness in his eyes that contrasted sharply with the predatory gazes of the other buyers. "Come down from there," Liu Ming said gently, extending his hand to help her from the platform. His voice was nothing like what Xiu Lan had expected from someone wealthy enough to make such an extravagant purchase. There was no harshness, no assumption of superiority, just quiet authority mixed with something that might have been compassion. As they walked away from the marketplace, Liu Ming's aide, Captain Wu, caught up with them, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. "General," he said quietly, "what are your intentions with the girl? Surely you don't need another household servant." Liu Ming paused, realizing he didn't have a complete answer to that question. His purchase had been an impulse driven by moral outrage rather than practical planning. "She'll come to my household," he said finally. "We'll determine her role once I've had time to assess her needs and capabilities." Xiu Lan listened to this conversation with growing bewilderment. In her limited experience, powerful people who bought children had very specific and usually unpleasant purposes in mind. The general's uncertainty seemed almost more frightening than certainty would have been, because she couldn't predict what might happen to her. As they walked through Xi'an's winding streets toward the military quarter, where Liu Ming maintained his residence, Xiu Lan caught glimpses of a world she had never seen before. Guards who bowed respectfully to the general, merchants who stepped aside to let them pass, officials who greeted Liu Ming with obvious deference. Chapter 4. Entry into Another World. General Liu Ming's residence reflected his status as one of the Empire's most important military commanders, while maintaining an atmosphere that was surprisingly warm and welcoming. Unlike the ostentatious palaces of court nobles, his home emphasized functionality and comfort with elegant simplicity that spoke to his practical nature and military background. The household staff who greeted them seemed genuinely fond of their master, offering the respectful affection of servants who were treated well rather than the fearful submission Xiu Lan had observed in other wealthy homes. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, was a motherly woman in her 50s who took immediate charge of Xiu Lan's care with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing complex household logistics. "The poor child is half-starved," Mrs. Chen observed, clucking her tongue in disapproval as she examined Xiu Lan's thin frame and hollow cheeks. "We'll need to feed her gradually to avoid making her sick, and those clothes need to be burned and replaced immediately." Liu Ming watched this assessment with growing certainty that his impulsive decision had been correct. Mrs. Chen's maternal instincts and the household's general atmosphere of kindness provided exactly what a traumatized child needed: safety, care, and the chance to recover from whatever horrors she had experienced. Over the following days, as Xiu Lan slowly adapted to her new environment, Liu Ming began to understand the full extent of what he had rescued her from. Her flinching reactions to sudden movements suggested physical abuse. Her hoarding of food indicated prolonged hunger, and her reluctance to speak revealed someone who had learned that words could be dangerous. But gradually, as she realized that no one in the household intended to hurt her, Xiu Lan began to show glimpses of the intelligent, spirited child she had been before tragedy destroyed her family. Mrs. Chen reported that she was quick to learn household tasks, eager to help with cooking and cleaning, and surprisingly articulate when she felt safe enough to speak. "She's not just grateful for rescue," Mrs. Chen told the general. "She's genuinely sweet-natured and clever. Whatever family raised her did well before circumstances forced them to let her go. Chapter 5. The Discovery of Hidden Talents. As weeks passed and Xiu Lan's health and confidence improved, Liu Ming began to notice qualities in her that suggested she was far more than just another orphaned peasant child. Her speech, when she felt comfortable enough to talk freely, revealed an education that was unusual for someone of her apparent background. She could read basic characters, perform arithmetic, and displayed knowledge of poetry and history that impressed the household's educated staff. When Liu Ming questioned her about this education, Xiu Lan explained that her father, despite being a weaver, had been determined that his daughter should have opportunities he had never enjoyed. He said that knowledge was the only inheritance that couldn't be stolen, she said quietly. Every evening after work, he taught me everything he could remember from his own brief schooling. This revelation changed how Liu Ming viewed Xiu Lan's potential future. Rather than simply providing her with shelter and basic work, he began to consider whether she might benefit from formal education that could prepare her for something more than domestic service. The decision was made easier by Xiu Lan's obvious hunger for learning. When she discovered Liu Ming's library filled with military treatises, historical records, and classical literature, she begged permission to read whatever books she could understand. Liu Ming found her there one evening, struggling through a text on ancient philosophy with the determined concentration of someone who valued every word. "Do you understand what you're reading?" he asked gently. Xiu Lan looked up, afraid she had overstepped some boundary. "Some of it, honored General. The characters I don't know I try to guess from context. My father taught me that method." Liu Ming smiled, remembering his own childhood hunger for books and knowledge. "Would you like me to arrange for proper tutoring? There's no reason you shouldn't have the same educational opportunities as children born to privilege." The hope that blazed in Xiu Lan's eyes was answer enough. Chapter 6. Education and Transformation. Within a month, Liu Ming had arranged for Master Zhang, a retired imperial tutor, to begin Xiu Lan's formal education. The scholar, initially skeptical about teaching a former slave girl, quickly became impressed by his student's quick wit and genuine passion for learning. "She absorbs knowledge like a desert absorbs rain," Master Zhang reported to Liu Ming. "Her mind is exceptionally quick, and she asks questions that demonstrate real understanding rather than mere memorization. With proper guidance, she could achieve scholarly levels that would be impressive in children of the highest noble families." Xiu Lan threw herself into her studies with the intensity of someone who understood how precious this opportunity was. She learned classical Chinese, studied history and philosophy, practiced calligraphy until her characters were works of art, and absorbed lessons in mathematics, astronomy, and literature with equal enthusiasm. But Liu Ming ensured that her education extended beyond books. He arranged for lessons in music, having noticed her beautiful singing voice, instruction in painting and poetry composition, and training in the social graces that would allow her to function confidently in educated society. More importantly, he began including her in conversations about current events, seeking her opinions on political developments and social issues. Despite her youth, Xiu Lan often offered insights that surprised him with their perceptiveness and originality. "You see patterns that others miss," he told her after she correctly predicted how a provincial governor would respond to new imperial policies. That ability to understand human motivation and political dynamics is rare at any age. As her confidence grew, Xiu Lan began to express herself more freely, revealing a personality that combined intellectual curiosity with genuine compassion for others. She often asked about the welfare of common people affected by imperial policies, showing concern for those whose circumstances reminded her of her own difficult past. Liu Ming realized that his impulsive rescue of a starving orphan had given him something he hadn't expected. A surrogate daughter whose intelligence and character filled spaces in his life he hadn't known were empty. Chapter 7. The Unexpected Challenge. Xiu Lan's remarkable transformation did not go unnoticed by others in Xi'an's social circles. As word spread about General Liu Ming's unusual protégé, a former slave girl who now displayed the education and refinement of nobility, reactions varied from admiration to suspicion to outright hostility. Some praised Liu Ming's generosity and Xiu Lan's achievements as examples of how talent could flourish regardless of origins. Others whispered that the general was being foolish, wasting resources on someone whose low birth made her ultimately unsuitable for the position she was assuming in his household. The most vocal criticism came from Lady Wang, the wife of a prominent court official, who had long sought to arrange a marriage between her own daughter and one of Liu Ming's military protégés. She saw Xiu Lan's presence in the general's household as an inappropriate elevation of someone who should know her place. "It's unnatural," Lady Wang declared at social gatherings. "Raising a slave girl as if she were nobility creates dangerous precedents. What will common people think if they see that the proper social order can be overturned so easily?" These criticisms might have remained at the level of social gossip, but Lady Wang made the mistake of attempting to humiliate Xiu Lan publicly during a festival celebration at Liu Ming's residence. She deliberately asked Xiu Lan to serve tea to the assembled guests, intending to remind everyone of the girl's servile origins. Instead of being embarrassed, Xiu Lan performed the tea service with such grace and dignity that she impressed even her critics. More significantly, when Lady Wang made a snide comment about people knowing their proper place, Xiu Lan responded with quiet eloquence that demonstrated both her education and her strength of character. "I am grateful every day for the opportunities I've been given," Xiu Lan said calmly. "I hope to prove worthy of that generosity through my actions and achievements, not through accident of birth." The response silenced Lady Wang and earned Xiu Lan respect from guests who had been prepared to dismiss her as an upstart. Chapter 8. A Father's Pride. As Xiu Lan approached her 16th birthday, Liu Ming faced a decision that had been building for months. Despite his initial intention to simply provide the girl with safety and basic education, she had become the daughter he had never had. His own marriage had been childless, a source of private sorrow that he had learned to accept as the will of heaven. Watching Xiu Lan develop into an intelligent, capable young woman had filled that emptiness in ways he hadn't anticipated. Her presence had brought warmth and purpose to his household that extended far beyond her individual accomplishments. The question now was how to formalize her status in ways that would protect her future and give her the social standing necessary to marry well and establish her own household. Adoption was possible but complicated, requiring imperial approval and extensive documentation. Liu Ming decided to approach the matter directly, summoning Xiu Lan to his private study for a conversation about her future. She entered with the composed bearing she had developed over years of education and social training, but he could see the nervousness in her eyes. "Xiu Lan," he began, "you've been part of my household for 4 years now. In that time, you've grown from a frightened child into a remarkable young woman. I want to discuss your future and the options available to you." He outlined several possibilities: continued residence in his household as a valued companion and assistant, marriage to a suitable young man with a generous dowry, or formal adoption that would make her legally his daughter with all the rights and status that entailed. "The choice is yours," he concluded. "You've proven yourself capable of making wise decisions about your own life." Xiu Lan listened carefully before responding. "Honored father," she said, using the title naturally for the first time. You saved my life when you could have simply walked away from that auction. Everything I've become is because of your kindness. If you believe adoption would serve your interests as well as mine, I would be honored to become your daughter officially. 9. The adoption ceremony. The formal adoption of Xiu Lan took place during the Spring Festival, with ceremonies designed to demonstrate Liu Ming's complete acceptance of her as his heir and daughter. The process required extensive preparation, including petitions to the Imperial Court, testimony from witnesses about Xiu Lan's character and accomplishments, and careful attention to legal protocols. Emperor Kangxi himself approved the adoption, having heard reports about Liu Ming's unusual protégé and her remarkable transformation. The imperial seal on the adoption documents made Xiu Lan's new status unquestionable, silencing critics who had questioned the propriety of elevating a former slave to noble rank. The adoption ceremony itself was attended by the highest levels of Xi'an society, including military commanders, court officials, wealthy merchants, and scholars who had followed Xiu Lan's progress with interest. Master Zhang spoke eloquently about her scholarly achievements, while Mrs. Chen provided testimony about her character and kindness to household staff. But the most moving moment came when Liu Ming formally presented Xiu Lan to the assembled guests as his daughter and heir. 4 years ago, he said, I encountered a child whose spirit refused to be broken despite circumstances that would have destroyed many adults. Today, I present to you a young woman whose intelligence, integrity, and compassion exemplify the best of human nature. Xiu Lan, now dressed in silk robes appropriate to her new status and wearing the jade jewelry that marked her as Liu Ming's daughter, responded with a speech that demonstrated both her gratitude and her understanding of the responsibilities that came with her position. I pledge to honor the name I now bear, she declared, not through pride in privilege, but through service to others who face the challenges I once knew. Mercy and education saved my life. I hope to extend both to others who need them. The ceremony concluded with a feast that brought together people from every level of society, symbolizing how Xiu Lan's adoption represented possibilities for social mobility based on merit rather than birth. Chapter 10. The Marriage Proposal. As Xiu Lan's reputation for intelligence and accomplishment spread throughout the region, marriage proposals began arriving from families seeking to ally themselves with General Liu Ming through his adopted daughter. These offers ranged from ambitious young scholars hoping to advance their careers to established officials who valued her proven capabilities over traditional concerns about bloodline. Liu Ming reviewed each proposal carefully with Xiu Lan, emphasizing that she should choose based on compatibility and mutual respect rather than political advantage. Marriage should be a partnership between equals, he advised, not a transaction where one person becomes subordinate to another. The proposal that interested Xiu Lan came from Captain Chen Hao, one of Liu Ming's most trusted junior officers. Chen Hao was known for his military competence and scholarly interests, but what attracted Xiu Lan was his genuine respect for her intelligence and his apparent indifference to her origins. During their formal courtship meetings, Chen Hao discussed literature, philosophy, and current events with Xiu Lan as an intellectual equal. He asked for her opinions on military strategy, sought her advice about administrative problems, and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts rather than simply trying to impress her with his own knowledge. I've watched how you handle difficult situations, he told her during one of their chaperoned conversations. You have the rare ability to see solutions that others miss, and the courage to speak truth even when it's unpopular. Those qualities would make you an ideal partner for someone in military or government service. Liu Ming approved of the match enthusiastically. Chen Hao is a man of principle who has proven his loyalty and competence repeatedly, he told Xiu Lan. More importantly, He sees your intelligence and character as assets rather than threats to his own position. The engagement was announced during the autumn festival with celebrations that demonstrated the high regard in which both families were held by Xi'an society. Chapter 11. The Wedding and New Beginnings. Xiu Lan's wedding to Captain Chen Hao became one of the most celebrated social events in Xi'an's recent history. The ceremony itself honored traditional protocols while incorporating elements that acknowledged her unique journey from orphaned slave to noble bride. Liu Ming spared no expense in ensuring that his adopted daughter's wedding would be remembered as a celebration worthy of the highest noble families. The guest list included regional commanders, court officials, prominent merchants, and scholars, demonstrating the breadth of respect that both Liu Ming and Xiu Lan had earned. But Xiu Lan insisted on including representatives from Xi'an's charitable institutions and schools in the festivities. "I want to remember that celebration should include gratitude for opportunities to help others," she explained to Liu Ming. Her wedding robes incorporated silk woven in patterns that honored both her adoptive family's military heritage and her birth parents' craft, symbolizing how her past and present had merged into something beautiful and meaningful. The jade jewelry she wore had been gifts from Liu Ming, but she also carried a small remembrance of her parents, a simple silver hairpin that had belonged to her mother. During the formal toasts, Liu Ming spoke about Xiu Lan's transformation in terms that emphasized her own achievements rather than simply his family's generosity. "We celebrate today not just a marriage, but the flowering of exceptional potential that demonstrates what human beings can accomplish when given opportunity and recognition," he declared. Chen Hao's wedding toast focused on his bride's character and capabilities. "I marry a woman who understands both hardship and privilege, who has the wisdom to see clearly through surface appearances, and who possesses the compassion to help others achieve their own potential. I consider myself blessed beyond measure." The celebration continued for 3 days, with entertainments that brought together people from every level of society and demonstrated the social mobility that Xiu Lan's story represented. Chapter 12. Legacy of Transformation. Years later, as Xiu Lan established herself as one of Xi'an's most influential women through her charitable work and social leadership, historians would point to her story as emblematic of the best aspects of Chinese civilization, the recognition of human potential regardless of origins, and the belief that education and virtue could transcend the circumstances of birth. Her marriage to Chen Hao proved to be a partnership of equals, with both spouses supporting each other's careers and public service. Chen Hao rose to become one of the empire's most respected generals, while Xiu Lan became known for her educational initiatives and support for orphaned children. Together, they established schools throughout the region where children from poor families could receive education regardless of their ability to pay fees. Xiu Lan's personal involvement in these institutions, combined with her own story of transformation, inspired countless students to pursue learning with the same determination she had shown. Liu Ming, who lived to see his adopted daughter become a grandmother, often spoke of how his impulsive decision to rescue a starving child from the auction block had become the most meaningful act of his entire life. "I thought I was saving her," he would tell visitors, "but she saved me by showing me what true nobility looks like." The schools and charitable institutions that Xiu Lan founded continued to operate long after her death, becoming permanent fixtures in Chinese education and social welfare. Her approach to helping the disadvantaged focused on providing skills and opportunities rather than simple charity, influenced how later generations thought about poverty and social mobility. But perhaps Xiu Lan's greatest legacy was the example she provided of how compassion and opportunity could transform individual lives and entire communities. Her story became part of Chinese folklore, retold in countless variations that emphasized different aspects of her journey from slave to lady. The auction block where Liu Ming first saw her was eventually replaced by a school that bore her name, ensuring that the site of her greatest vulnerability became a symbol of hope and possibility for future generations. Students at the school learned her story as part of their regular curriculum, understanding that their own humble origins need not limit their dreams or achievements. In the end, Xiu Lan's transformation became more than just a personal success story. It became a testament to the Chinese ideal that education, virtue, and determination could overcome any obstacle, and that true nobility was measured by character rather than birth.